Hello everyone and welcome to Making It on Mondays. I am just going to check that I'm live and hopefully I can see you all. It looks like I am. Beautiful. So welcome to Making It on Mondays. My name is Louise Jeffrey. I'm an acupuncturist. I am a practitioner of Chinese medicine and I'm also a coach. And I'm your Making It on Mondays host along with the lovely Amy. So today we're going to talk about BBT charting, temperature charting, and how we're going to talk about how to do it, what it tells us, and how it can help you to conceive. So I'm going to chat for about 10 minutes today, maybe slightly less than 10 minutes. But if you're on live or you're on the recording, please do let me know. I would love to know that you're on with me. And I would love to, just to say hi. That would be really, really good. All right, so if you've done charting before, please let me know in the comments box. I'd love to know what your experience was with charting, whether it was helpful, unhelpful. Some people find it rather invasive. Some people find it rather insightful. I'd love to know what your experience is or was if you were either BBT or temperature charting. All right, so let's first talk about, what is BBT charting? What is temperature charting? For those of you who have never done it before, it's where we take our body's basal body temperature at the same time each day. And this gives us an indication of when we're ovulating and when we have ovulated, right? So from that perspective, it's helpful for us to, to assess our most fertile period. So how does BBT charting work? And how does temperature charting work? Well, what we do is, with charting, is we set our alarm for first thing in the morning at a time when we would typically wake up every day, all right? So for example, if on a weekday, we wake up at 6 a.m., then every day, including the weekends, we need to wake up at the same time, right? At 6 a.m., and we take our temperature at the same time each day. And what we do is we have the thermometer next to the bed. Now, if you're not sure what thermometer to get, if you haven't started charting yet, or if you're going to give it a try, you can ask your pharmacist. They're always really, really helpful. There's quite a lot of them on the market. But essentially, you'll need a good mouth or a vaginal thermometer that is it's digital. So it gives you 2 points and it's accurate. And what you will also need is a chart, which I will post after this live today. You'll need either a paper chart that you print out, where you plot your temperature in a graph and you write down details, or you will need to have an app where you can put it into your phone and it'll track it for you. All right. So you'll need all of those things, but essentially you'll need a thermometer. It's really, really important to have a good one. Now, what you need to know about charting and the way that you do it and the way that you take your temperature is, as I said, it's at the same time every single day. But what's really important is that you haven't gotten out of bed for 3 to 4 hours prior to taking your temperature, right? So if you're someone who wakes up in the early hours of the morning and goes to the bathroom, you're going to have to either hold on to that and go back to sleep, or you're going to have to make sure that you go to the bathroom before, if you're waking up at 6, stay before 2 a.m. All right. I know this is a little bit tricky, but the reason that this is important is because if you get out of bed within those, hi Karis, within those 3 to 4 hours prior to taking your temperature can really skew your reading. Because what it does is it raises your basal body temperature and will give you an inaccurate reading. Okay. So your alarm goes off at 6 a.m. You reach over and you grab your thermometer, which is next to you next to your bed, and you take your temperature. And then after that point, you can relax a little. You're going to write your temp down on your paper chart, if you're old school, like me, or in your phone, if you prefer. And then you're also going to record into the chart any symptoms that you experienced the day before or through the night, right? So you're going to put them on the correct day. Symptoms that you might record might be, for example, whether you had intercourse that day. You might record any changes in cervical mucus, all right? If you had a fever, that's really important. If you drank any alcohol, that's really important. Or if you had a late night or a restless night's sleep. Now, why these all matter, and there's space for you to write it on the paper chart, is because they can skew your basal body temperature and they can push your basal body temperature up, all right, and give you an inconsistent reading. So you've been really, really good and consistent, and you've been recording your temperature now for a few weeks. You started on day 1 of your cycle, or as close to day 1 as possible. And then you're probably thinking now, well, what does this info tell me? Like, how do I make head or tail of this info? Well, the reason that we track our basal body temperature, our BBT, is because at ovulation time, what we typically see is a shift upwards in basal body temperature by around 0.3 degrees. All right. And if we're watching carefully and we're looking at other body signs, we're going to be able to tell when we're ovulating. Now, obviously, once our temperature's gone up, we've already ovulated. All right. So it's really, really important for us to look for other signs as well. So on a typical BBT chart, what we would see is we'd see average basal body temperatures that sit between 36.2 and 36.5 degrees. All right. Now, it's unlikely that we're going to have exactly the same temperature every single day. But what they would do is they would sit within a range. So they might go 36.2, 36.4, 36.3. They're going to kind of sit within a range, all right, of 36.2 to 36.5. If yours is slightly out of that range, that's okay. It's not an exact science, but generally they're going to sit within that range. And then what we typically see is that just before ovulation, we see a slight dip into slightly lower than average temps for that average, all right? And then we see a sharp rise. Now, some women don't see this little dip, so don't worry if you don't have it, because it's only there for around 12 hours and you might miss it depending on what time of day it is. But essentially, once your temperature has risen and you see the rise going up, that means that you've already ovulated, all right? So really what's happening here is at ovulation time, we're seeing a sharp rise, and this is around 0.3 degrees more than the average that we've been seeing before ovulation, so in our follicular phase. So we have the follicular phase before ovulation, we've got the luteal phase after ovulation, and what we're looking for is a 0.3 degree rise between the averages in the first part of the cycle and into the second part of the cycle, all right? So for example, we may see the temperatures rise from a range of somewhere between 36.2 and 36.5 to a range of 36.5 to 36.8. All right, now everyone's different. As I said, it's not an exact science. And we're not so concerned with the absolute values themselves as we are to see a 0.3 degree difference in temperature between the follicular phase before ovulation and the luteal phase after ovulation. All right. And we don't know exactly why the body temperature rises like this, but we think it's in response to the increasing progesterone that's starting to be produced by the ovary at that point, so from ovulation, because progesterone keeps the body temperature high in order to sustain a pregnancy. Now, if you're looking only at the chart that you've got for this month, if it's the first time that you're doing it, you're going to go, well, this is not helpful for me because I've already ovulated by the time I look at my chart. But what you need to remember is that once you've done it for a few months, you'll start to see a picture, okay? Now, we're obviously concerned about when you ovulate. Hopefully, you'll see an abundance of cervical mucus come around that time because ovulation occurs just before the spike in temperature happens. And we as women are most fertile within around 24 hours of this time. Now, what we should notice, and again, this is not an exact science, is that we have an increase in stretchy egg white cervical mucus in the days leading up to this shift in temperature. And then the day that we see the rise is typically the day that the most mucus is evident. But remember, everyone is different. And just because you don't see much on that day doesn't mean you can't fall pregnant. Okay. Now, some people struggle to see an obvious rise in temperature, and they may see like a seesaw pattern in their temps. It might go up, all the way up and all the way down. You know, there's no kind of pattern. Or they might see that the temps, that there's no rise in temperature at all around ovulation, or perhaps the temperatures are overall too high, like going to above 37 degrees, or they're too low. Do they go below 36 degrees? Now, does this mean we can't fall pregnant if we don't get a chart that looks similar to what I described earlier? Not necessarily, but in TCM, so in traditional Chinese medicine, it means that there are irregularities that we may need to address for you to fall pregnant. So for example, if the BBT is too low in the luteal phase, which is the second part of your cycle, it may mean that there's a low metabolic rate and possibly low thyroid activity, right? And this can affect fertility. And it can also potentially negatively impact circulating progesterone, which we need for pregnancy. Now, in Chinese medicine, we see this as a deficiency of kidney yang or spleen yang. And so we would use herbs and acupuncture to address that imbalance. Now, another example might be if your BBTs are too high, like above 37 degrees, then there may be too much heat, which can dry the bodily fluids and the cervical mucus and make it difficult for sperm to swim up the cervix. Okay, so again, we would use Chinese herbs and acupuncture to clear heat and to nourish the yin and fluids. All right, does that make sense? So it's not just about when you're ovulating, it's really, really helpful for that. But for us, if you're struggling to fall pregnant, it can tell us if there's an imbalance within your follicular and your luteal phase. All right. Another variation might be if the follicular phase is too short or too long, or if the luteal phase is too short as well. Okay. Now, the great thing with temping is that, as I said, it gives us an idea of whether there's anything we need to address in terms of imbalances in the body. And, you know, if we're trying to fall pregnant, it gives us an indication of when our most fertile days are. Now, you can also use what we call OPKs, or ovulation predictor kits, with the urine sticks. So you can use those to track when you're ovulating. But what this won't tell you is whether your temperatures are too low, too high, whether your follicular luteal phase is too short or too long. Okay? So I hope that makes sense. You can use the OPKs alongside your temperature charting and your tracking as well. So that's it in a nutshell. That is how to temp your BBT. That's why it's useful. That's why it's important. So just to summarize once more, the key things to remember when charting: number one, make sure you have a good thermometer. Number two, make sure you don't get up for 4 hours prior to taking your temperature, 3 to 4 hours. Number three, take your temperature at the same time each day, even on the weekends. It means, unfortunately, setting your alarm on a Saturday and a Sunday. Number four, don't worry too much about the absolute values themselves, but rather that there is a 0.3 rise between the follicular and the luteal phases. All right, just remember, this is not an exact science. People fall pregnant. Don't freak out if you look at it and go, my God, it's not perfect, the way that Louise has described. But just remember to be looking for the patterns that I've been talking about. And the last thing to remember, it's best to have intercourse within 12 to 24 hours of the temperature rise to make sure that you keep a close eye on what's happening with your chart. And if you're struggling with your temps and you can't see a clear pattern, then take your chart to your Chinese medicine practitioner or to your fertility specialist, and they will help you to make head or tail of it. You can even ask questions if you want in the comments box as well. So I hope that the session was helpful. I hope it was useful. I've gone just over my 10 minutes. So let us know in the comments box if there's anything that resonated with you, if you've got any questions. I'll be back next week. I will see you all then. I hope you have a beautiful week. Bye for now.